Hi, Kate. You probably have a little one next to you. All right.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the 2021 New Orleans Poetry Festival. I'm Jonathan Penton from the NOPF board. Before we get started, we want to thank our major sponsors, especially the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival and the Academy of American Poets, who have helped us keep this year's fest free and open to all. It's good to see you with us at this event, and we hope to see you at the many others we're hosting throughout the month of April. Just go to nolapoetry.com and you can find them all. All right, I'm going to turn this over to Julia Johnson, who's moderating this session. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Jonathan and Benjamin and Megan for being here. And I'm sorry if I'm not seeing other people who are involved directly with the festival on the screen. But also welcome to everyone who's here. I wanted to mention at the start that one of our participants in this panel, Dara Wire, sadly won't be able to join us. She's okay, but there's been a situation that she has to tend to, and so she can't make it this afternoon. She's very sorry, and she doesn't really know it. She sort of gave us permission, but we're gonna probably use some of her a lot of her ideas from today, and I still have them like just as if she's here. So I probably won't read her bio because you all can read that just to save time, but I think we have an hour today, and so it's not a whole lot of time, and I really would love to leave at least 15 minutes at the end for a discussion, maybe even longer, depending on how it goes, because we have one fewer participant, but I know Kathy has some people who have a lot to contribute, hopefully. So I'm gonna share a screen. Oops, I hope it's not too late to get that.
We can do that. I'll just make you a co-host.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I should have asked that earlier.
There you go. You should be able to share screen now.
Okay, cool. So you'd think I would be really good at this by now. All right. So can everybody see this? Can everyone see my New Orleans Poetry Festival? I just want to I'm using that as a way to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, so this is our panel. So if you're not, I say this to my students on the first day. If you think that you're in a different, supposed to be in a different place, in a different class or a different session, you can leave now. Just making sure that you're in the right place. This is today's topic. Does who you are affect who publishes you and who you want to publish you? And so, as I said, I didn't edit this when I found out that Dara wasn't going to join us. So, okay. So we wanted to do this in 3 rounds. And so just so you kind of know where we're going with this. So 3 parts. And we have the first round. I wanted to, and forgive me if this is not, whoops, sorry, I want to do one other thing. I want to, sorry that I'm kind of all over the place here. I just took it off of screen share. Okay. I forgot that I would like to introduce our panelists. And I thought that you all might have this, but I wanted to just quickly read the description of this panel to refresh your memory, or maybe you actually never saw the description. But this is what we hope to talk about today. Poets and editors of Factory Hollow Press, the Hollins Critic, Jubilat, Mississippi Review, and New World Writing focus on who they are and their experiences and how their experiences have defined who and what they publish and why. Women editors from Toni Morrison to Joyce Carol Oates to Harriet Monroe to Rebecca Wolff to Anne Waldman to Eileen Myles have historically created trends and controversy. VIDA has shown that editorial bias can be counted on to continue. Their yearly count, plain and simple, can't be denied. Race, gender, place, age, style, what you can do to identify if a journal is right for you. Editors will tell stories about how they affect and have been affected. Samples of just a few important writers we've published will be shared. Your concerns will be the focus. Bring some of your experiences. Our conversation will speak to those. So I just want you all to kind of have that in the back of your mind. And I'm going to, in a minute, talk just briefly about VIDA, just in case there's anyone here who might not be familiar with VIDA. So I'd like to first introduce my two other colleagues and panelists here. Angela Ball. Angela Ball is the recipient of awards from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Mississippi Arts Commission, and the Sotheby's International Poetry Competition, among others. Her most recent book of poetry is Talking Pillow, University of Pittsburgh Press. She teaches in the Center for Writers, part of the School of Humanities at the University of Southern Mississippi. With her dogs, Miss Bishop and Scarlett, she divides her time between Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and Covington, Louisiana, not far from where some of you are. Next is Catherine Henkla. Catherine Henkla is the author of over a dozen books, including 9 volumes of poetry. Her recent titles include Great Bear, a finalist for the Library of Virginia Prize, Galaxies and Lost Places on Losing and Finding Home, a memoir in essays. Henkla teaches in the Jackson Center for Creative Writing at Hollins University and has served as poetry editor of the Hollins Critic since 1997. I'm Julia Johnson. I'm just going to read my bio. Julia Johnson, grew up in New Orleans and is the author of 3 collections of poetry and a chapbook. She served as editor of Mississippi Review, including a special issue on the prose poem, as well as an anthology, 30 Years of Mississippi Review. She edited the collected poems of Jane Gentry. This is kind of fun, reading about yourself in the third person. Her poems have appeared in the Cincinnati Review, Poetry International, Sentence, a Journal of Prose Poetics, Jubilat, Tin House, and numerous other journals and anthology. Johnson is professor of English at the University of Kentucky and was the founding director of its MFA program in creative writing. I hope you all will check out Dara Wyer's bio on the website and read all of her books if you haven't already done so. I know that there are some Dara Wyer fans here. So we're just going to get started. This is very casual. And I'm going to go ahead and do what I was doing a minute ago, which was going to kind of go to this slideshow again. So as I said, I kind of would like this to be, maybe it's just because I'm in the teaching mode, because we're in the middle of the semester, but how many of you I'm curious, how many of you know, we have a small group here, so raise your hand if you know about VIDA. I don't know if you all can do that. You just go to the raise hand feature. Or you can just raise your hand. Yeah, so I just felt like we had to, that it wouldn't be right if we didn't talk about VIDA and its importance. So I just thought I would quickly go to the website. And it was interesting for me to look at it because I hadn't looked at it in a while. And I sort of, I don't know, Angela and Kathy, if you all look at this regularly, but I don't. And I felt kind of bad about it because I think it's so important to, I mean, it looks like they're a little, I guess, no, I don't think it's really behind because I think it takes time to do the statistics. But anyway, I just think it's really interesting to look at where we are in terms of, I guess, some sort of, equity. But on here are some really good articles on this very topic that we're talking about today. So a big portion of today's discussion is kind of about resources and tips. And anyway, as you can see, there are all kinds of, there's an up-to-date count and lots of charts, depending on, like, let's just pick out one, the Cincinnati Review. It's a little bit slow for some reason. Loading. Maybe it won't, maybe there's too much happening to load it. I was able to load it earlier. It could be because we're on Zoom. But you all can do this later. But you can at least write this down. And I think it's a really cool thing if you are teachers to share this with students who might be looking to publish and look at, it's smart to look at what these magazines are publishing, who and what these magazines are publishing. So it's taking a really long time, but you'll see here, it was just kind of like, okay, well, the Cincinnati Review is publishing 59.69% women, 0.78% non-binary, 39.53%. I don't know, that kind of gave me a little bit of hope I love the Cincinnati Review. They've published me. I'd love to be published in there again. So I guess I would probably, be excited about sending to them because of their track record. Okay, so anyway, I think it's a great resource, and I'll show you some other ones, but I wanted to start with that one. Having a little bit of trouble navigating this thing. Okay, I'm gonna stop share again, and then just because I don't want that, it seems to be really bogging down the internet. Okay. All right. So I am going to just turn things over now to Angela Ball, who will talk about what she would like to talk about for a few minutes.
Thank you, Julia. For about 35 years, I was the main poetry editor for Mississippi Review. For the last few years, I've kind of cut back a little bit, and now what I do is occasionally judge the Mississippi Review Prize. And a few years ago, I did that. And the result was the poem that you see on the screen, and the selection of the poem and the poem itself is kind of a David and Goliath story. As an editor, it's really important not to let preconceptions guide you. I'd assumed that the paper submissions for the Mississippi Review Prize wouldn't be very interesting because that had kind of been the case, in years past. So I delegated reading those to grad students first, and then I was going to read them after that. Among those students was the fine poet Hannah Dow, who has published with published with the press that the Cincinnati Review started, published a book with them, in fact. So she has a connection there. When I got the work, she asked me to take a special look at a poem by Sarah New, a woman living in Louisiana. In her cover letter, Sarah New named no credentials, no creative writing study or previous publications. Why were we lucky enough to get her work? Her name was certainly a tip-off that her poem would be exceptional. I'm going to use it as an example of the kind of poem I not only like, but need to see. Just talking to myself. I cut down a tree yesterday in my backyard, and I asked myself, why am I doing this? Since this young tree is not dead and has many years to live. And I answered myself, because this scrubby tree is overshadowed by a large and powerful oak, and this giant oak denies the scrubby tree room to grow. So I just sawed it down to get it over with, better sooner than later. For it is only in the Bible that David wins over Goliath. Real life is not like that. Darwin knew that. I found this poem totally extraordinary, and also very surprising that the author had no credentials of the usual kind. And the point, I guess, that this poem makes, I think, is that you shouldn't let yourself get cynical about submitting to prizes or journals. The editors just want to be surprised and swept off their feet by something they don't expect. They're not looking for names they recognize or people with the longest, most impressive bios. In fact, I do think it makes sense to be a little bit leery of really long submission letters with many, many credentials, because that suggests somebody who thinks they're entitled and they're trying to kind of establish credentials instead of using the poem to do that. So I found it a really hopeful thing, and I was so glad that there was somebody to tip me off that my preconception was wrong. In making the complicated simple, Sarah New is the David of poetry. The defeat of the scrubby tree becomes a victory made of words. In real life, Sarah New could not accept the prize money because it would have affected her public assistance. So anyway, that is my contribution to our first round.
Thank you, Angela. Wow, that is a really, that's a good reminder. It's something that I haven't really had, I think, in my own experience as an editor. I haven't had that, I guess, opportunity to have that happen to me. But it's something I think I tell my students that I advise on the New Limestone Review, because they're graduate student editors of the New Limestone Review at UK. And they tend to be very snobby about who they want to publish, right, in the journal. They want to publish writers with big names, which I think is fine, but I also encourage them to read the work before they read the letters or the cover letter. So I think that this is a really good example of that. And I also think I do it sometimes in my own teaching. I sometimes have to remind myself to not be quick to judge a student, maybe who hasn't had any experience in creative writing, and maybe it's a biology, a pre-med student who, is just writing really, I think maybe they're writing for the first time and they turn in incredible work. So I think this is a great example. Thank you, Angela. Kathy?
Hi, everybody. This is my New Orleans from Virginia. This is my coffee can to make me feel like I'm in New Orleans. So tip of that. I'm going to reverse everything they just said. Just for fun. I'm going to tell different stories. I do think that more and more what Julia was just saying is the case. Like, people will Google you and find out who you are before they really even take a good look at your work. And I'd like to roll all that back to Angela's story, because she's a very open editor, but I don't think everyone is. So I want to tell a little personal story about myself as a child poet. And I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I know I was like 12, 13, or 14, no older than that. And somebody told me or showed me a poem in the New Yorker that was by a child. And so I put some of my little poems together in the way you did in those days. You had to type them up individually, fold them into an envelope, put a self-addressed stamped envelope in the envelope, and then put 2 stamps on the envelope and mail it. Okay, so I did that very hopefully, because I was under the impression that from my limited market research that they published children. And of course, my poems came back with a standard rejection from the New Yorker, which I guess was sort of an accomplishment at that age. And I drew the conclusion from that they just didn't like my work. And that was okay. I was really young and I figured I just needed to work harder on it. And so I did. And that wasn't a bad takeaway at all. But then, like, probably 40 years later, I discovered that the child whose poem I had seen was actually the child of a very famous poet. And so I had to revise my takeaway from years earlier with the understanding that they weren't going to publish a poem by a random child from Southwest Virginia. Okay. So maybe that is a story about corruption or something, but connections do matter. And they just will. I mean, the people that you know are your connections, and that person just happened to know the New Yorker editor. Wow, that's kind of amazing. But I don't think my takeaway when I was 12 or 13 or whatever it was is a bad one, because the only thing that you really can control in this endeavor is your own work. And the harder you work on that, the better. And nobody else can do that for you. So connections are not going to take care of the hard work that we all have to do on our own with our butts in our chairs, writing our poems the best we can over and over. And then I have 2 more little short stories about my own submissions. A little later than that, I was invited to submit to an anthology, and it was fiction. And I thought I had the perfect story for the anthology. And so I submitted it very hopefully. And they were co-editors. One editor had asked me to send the story. The other editor hadn't seen it yet. The other editor didn't want my story in the anthology. And the reason she did not want it in the anthology is because it was not a lesbian anthology. This was the early 90s. So that was kind of heart-wrenching. And then about a decade after that, someone asked me, Lisa Solid actually asked me to participate in an anthology that she was editing for Seal Press that was called Desire, Women Write About Wanting. And she particularly wanted me to write for the anthology so that there would be some diversity in it. Okay. So that is just like, yeah, it sounds like a victory lap of some weird sort, but I don't really think anybody wants their work like pigeonholed. And we have so much of that going on. I mean, I feel like we need to get to the point where everybody's welcome everywhere, depending on, but editors do shape what they're doing for good and for ill, and I think there's a great effort right now to represent, and the end result of that, I hope, will be that every space is open to whomever wants to be in that space, and we don't have to keep creating lanes for everybody to be in. So that's my contribution to round one.
I have a comment, if that's okay. I wonder if we've heard from that child poet since the child published their very first thing, Worker. I think that would be a terrible thing to live up to, like the burden. Well, my first published poem was in the New Yorker. It was only downhill from there.
For goodness sakes, maybe it wasn't even her first published poem. No, she is still a poet and still publishing poems, and that's why I didn't say the name. It's not someone who's been totally forgotten.
Oh, too bad.
I know, because the New Yorker still doesn't know that I'm alive.
What a great story, Kathy.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm sorry to keep going back and forth between sharing and not sharing, but I don't know if you all are like me with Zoom, but I don't like to always, when someone else is talking, I don't always like to see something else on the screen. I think it depends on what kind of computer you have. My husband is a scientist and he has 3 monitors and I don't have that. So maybe Susan, maybe you have 3 monitors happening right now. No? But I think like if you have lots of monitors, then it's okay. But if you have a little bitty screen, anyway, we don't have to talk about that right now, but I wanted to explain why I'm doing that sort of back and forth because I just can't, when I'm in a Zoom looking at a presentation, I can't look at someone and the screen. Okay. So Kathy, that's the second round, right? The Hollins Critic. Yeah. Okay. So I'm bouncing around a little bit because we're a little bit out of order, but I wanted to kind of put in a plug. So Angela Ball and I are both, I had to look up what our official titles are on the masthead. You probably know, Angela, what Angela and I are both advisory editors. Is that right, Angela?
Yes.
It sounds like a fancy title, but I wanted everyone who's in this group today to submit. I want to invite everybody to submit to New World Writing. And I would like everyone to take a look at New World Writing because I think it's a really interesting online journal. And I think that you all let's see, I feel like the internet, maybe it's my internet is very slow, but there is an extremely quick response time for this journal. And I would also say that that in terms of, it sort of answers Susan's question, which was in the chat. Susan asked, and I said that we'd talk about it later, but it's kind of a good time to talk about it because this is something I wanted to talk about, which is how would you analyze style of what a particular magazine accepts? And I think, Susan, do you want to elaborate on that question? Okay, she's muted. Okay, I think, I'm not sure I have the ability to unmute you. If I could, I would. You can write in the chat if you'd like.
Susan, I'm asking you to unmute. Julia, you can unmute people as a co-host.
Oh, Susan, thank you. Susan, I think you're still somehow muted. I'm not sure. Maybe your volume is way down. Okay. Well, if at any point we can hear you, please just jump in and interrupt. But Susan's question was, how would you analyze style of what a particular magazine accepts? And I would say that New World Writing, which is the brainchild of Frederick Bartholomew, I would say that, oops, I did not mean to do that. I'm so sorry. I would say that New World Writing is a great example of a magazine that accepts all styles and all types of writing. Kathy and Angela, could you answer that? Could you answer that question a little bit better than I can? I think it's I would say that the way to analyze style is to read the journals and to read more than one issue and to read kind of over a period of time because the editors change.
Yeah, but well, I think Mississippi Review has always had a kind of playfulness in the writing. We like to think of the work of writing as serious play. Generally, the poems have something unusual or surprising about them. I'll quote one line from somebody's poem from a long time ago. Think the speaker arrives at a place and just asks, who are these people? That kind of bewilderment seems to us to be a good and fitting reaction to life and the world. So we enjoy being in a state of not knowing, not being on top of things, not being able to pontificate, and we enjoy poetry and fiction that doesn't try to do those things. Mary Ruffel has been a contributor recently since the wonderful Adam Clay, my colleague, took over Mississippi Review. There was a special issue with a lot of her work in it, which I highly recommend. Yeah, just nothing dead serious because life's too important for that.
So I think that's right. I also kind of, I think that the question of like style is an interesting question, and I also think that sometimes, it goes back to Angela's anecdote, sometimes you can look at a journal and think that that they might not be interested in your work, and then they just, they take it. So I think some of that has to do with the actual submission. If you're a poet, you might send a range of poems to kind of see if one of them becomes of interest to the editor. So we had the rounds are like anecdotes, and so my contributions to this are a little bit random. So I'm going to go ahead and contribute, and then I'm going to turn it over to Angela and Kathy, because mine are sort of hard to, I think, distinguish between the two kinds of categories that we had talked about. So just really quickly, so I wanted everybody to submit to New World Writing. And then also I was just gonna, so this was the Mississippi Review issue, which I edited, which was 30 years of the Mississippi Review, and Angela served as the poetry editor for all of those years, plus I'm not sure how many, Angela, how many after that?
And I like leaving it up in the air.
Okay, but as you can see, this is a really thick journal. It's probably the thickest literary journal ever published. So it's giant. And I think that I wanted to show you all this because these are the contributors, but I couldn't fit all of them on the screen. And one of the things that I learned editing this issue was that I learned from Angela, and I learned from Frederick Barthelme that it really is important as an editor not only to be open to different styles of writing, but also to include as many women as you can. And what I found was I was really, because women are often historically underrepresented, and what I found was that the Mississippi Review over the years had done an incredible job, in doing that. So in the third round, I was going to just quickly offer, and then I'm going to hand it over to Angela and Kathy, but I was going to offer a little tip and something to think about if you're trying to figure out this notion of like, where do you want to publish and who do you want to publish you? I do this with my students, and this year there's been like a lot of my graduate students have had a lot of success with this. So, and I've been doing it for years, but for some reason this year is just, I guess, a banner year. So I'm just showing you as an example. So Ricky Laurentis, if you're not familiar with his work, he's a wonderful poet, a Cave Canem graduate fellow. He actually was born in New Orleans, and he was a fellow in creative writing at the Center for African American Poetry and Poetics at the University of Pittsburgh. So a couple of my students were writing poems and that I thought would be, that I thought it was just, it would be important. This work was important for them to read. So we talked about why, and then, we started talking about publishing. And so this is the tip I gave them, and you all probably already know this, so forgive me. If there's a poet who you really admire and enjoy reading, just go to their, particularly, if you're a young poet, young as in like someone who's just starting out publishing, go to their acknowledgements page and just look at where they've been published. and then, you know, look at those journals, because that's a really good place to start. And so I wanted to use this as an example, because my students had such great luck with this. They ended up getting published in these journals. So it was like, and the two students in particular, they said, Julia, do you know people at those journals, or did you call them or something? And I said, no. So it was just really, it was really cool. I was like, it works, see? And then they, you know, they kind of got excited about doing that, reading other books and looking in the acknowledgements and just being really nosy. And I think, I mean, I've done it a lot over the years. I guess I haven't had the quick success that the students had this time, but anyway, maybe Kathy and Angela have done this before. My slides have gotten completely out of order. So when, Angela, when you, do you want to talk now for the next round?
Sure.
I'm still on round 2, by the way.
Oh, let's go back to Kathy's round 2.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just gonna interject because I didn't want to.
No, I'm glad.
I'm on round 2 also.
Can you just click on one of the critic covers, and then if Benjamin, you could unmute EM. This is the Hollins Critic. It's a pamphlet of about 24 pages. It was started in 1964 at Hollins College. So you see there, Hollins College, it's now Hollins University. It is built around an essay, a critical essay about a contemporary writer. And the critic also includes book reviews and 4 or 5 poems every issue. And it's, the cover is always a line drawing of the writer who's featured, the essay about the writer. The writer is featured. So maybe you could show a couple more covers. This is Antler. I like Antler's work. You probably never heard of him. This is someone you probably have heard about. You see the name of the college has changed to university up there. So it's kind of an unusual but really beautiful print. It's only print, and I'd like to invite anybody in our session today to please submit to us. It's online submission, and we read from September to December. We only read 3 months because we can't take too many poems because we want them to come out in one cycle. So there's 5 issues in a year, but only 4 or 5 poems in each issue, depending on the length of the main essay. So I want to ask one of my assistant poetry editors who's here with us today to say something about her experience working as a screener, because this is something that we haven't mentioned so far on the panel today, but many magazines have screeners in addition to the editor. And in my case, I have a panel of 5 or 6 MFA students who help me read the submissions. And the only thing that's open submission at the Critic is the poetry. So 5 or 6 grad students and I will read all of the online submissions, and then we talk about them together. And I ask the grad students to nominate poems that they like, and then we talk about them. And then I nominate, they nominate. And I find that this has really helped me widen my taste, because they will bring poems to my attention that I might pass over. So it's really good for submitters, I think, in this, not to be just like, when we were talking about what's the taste of the magazine, how you figure that out. I don't know that you could figure out the taste of our magazine for the poetry, because I really trust my grad student readers to pick out poems that I wouldn't pick out. So, and those are often ones that are finally selected. So Emily, if you are unmuted, if you could say something about your experience as a screener for the critic.
Sure. I'm Emily Zida. I'm a second-year MFA student at Hollins, and it's been really great getting to work with Kathy 2 years as an assistant editor. The process is very much so like bringing everyone to the table, an egalitarian setting, and I think that's how Hollins kind of runs its own MFA program, and that's what I appreciated about being part of it, because we are kind of we're a small college in the mountains, and so we're going to have it's kind of like country zen in a way. And I think that we're really inviting towards this idea of completed poems that are just good finished work. And for us there were 5 of us graduate students going through things, and in sharing, and it was workshop style in a way, because, we would talk about different poems, both like ones that felt like complete works that we would want to publish and move forward. But there was an acknowledgement that everything was kind of, everything had its positives and its negatives. And I remember probably the most insightful experience I had as a screener was when we came to a poet who was fairly well known, at least well enough to have a decent sized Wikipedia page. And for us deciding as a group, like, this is good work, but this isn't ready yet. And I think that was something I'll take forward with me, because everyone who's prolific is in progress. Things are going to be finished and things are going to be, still in work. And so that was a good experience to have. And then of course, Kathy, because she's been the editor for so long, is going to have, an aesthetic taste and be more established as her own, as a person who's making these selections. But it was really great to see her mention that she had read a poet and published them before, and she had known that poet. And so, earlier when Kathy was talking about making connections, I was just thinking how, you can be your own advocate in a way by submitting to journals and creating that connection. They might not be able to publish you in that round, but when they write back to you and say, this was good work, we want to see more. I know now that they actually mean it, because you get so many submissions in a slush pile, that, to take that extra effort and reach out to somebody who you're not going to publish right now, but whose quality work you want to see in the future, that's making connections that last too. So.
Thank you.
So, Angela?
I would like to not talk, so there's more time maybe for questions when we get finished. So just skip right over me.
Kathy?
Maybe we should go to questions.
Yeah, I'm not clear. Megan, do we
Go to resources, Julia.
do we go right? Do we get cut off? And Jonathan, do we get cut off right at the hour?
No one's going to cut you off right at the hour. I mean, if you start to go into the next session, which I believe starts at 5:30, but no, you're not going to be cut off right at the hour.
Okay, so let's that's a good idea. Why don't we so these are some resources, and I'll just kind of scroll through these. These are ones that that Dara Wire put together. I'm wondering if would it be helpful if I put these in the chat so that you all can somehow save them? Yeah, okay. And then why don't we, while I'm doing that, let's open it up to questions, and I'll just be putting some resources in the chat, and maybe some of the questions will have to do with the resources that we've listed. Does that sound good?
Yes.
I'm going to allow people to unmute themselves. I don't think we have any trolls here.
It's a really small group, and
Yeah.
I don't think
Just
anybody
unmute
is
everybody.
a Zoom bomber. Yeah.
Yeah.
So questions or comments?
Oh, I see in the chat there's some questions.
Okay, great. I was multitasking, so I didn't see. So let's see. Let me go up. So Susan is elaborating on her earlier question. help me analyze narrative poetry, question mark, lots of imagery, political, surreal, etc. And to what degree are pieces solicited versus slush? Because if all solicited, what's the point of submitting? Well, I can answer that. It's never all solicited. There are always journals that are having open submissions. Would you all agree with that, Kathy, Angela?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes there are issues of a particular journal that are special issues, and they're kind of curated by invitation, but that's the exception rather than the rule.
So, so Kate is asking, Kate, I'm not sure of your exact title, but Kate is in charge. I'm just going to give you a title. Kate is in charge of the James Tate estate and is a new mother. So her question has to do a little bit with that. I'll read it. How does the historical underrepresentation of women or any group lead to bias in the writing process itself? Since becoming a mother, I've struggled with how to write about that using poetry, a form that doesn't seem to want to hold that experience without making it seem trite, which it is anything but.
It seems like a really complicated, self-reflective question that I really appreciate. But do we self-censor based on what we see as the possible thing? The possible thing is what we're able to read, right? I know in our last round reading for the critic, we picked out a poem, which was, I can't remember the exact title, but it was something like Makeup at 70. I think that might have been the title. And it was obviously by an older woman talking about that experience. And that's also something that I don't see poems about. And I think it's that people don't want to self-identify as older people. They don't want to write about that experience. But I love that we had that poem, and it was a good poem, and it's already come out. And it came out quickly. And I got a note from that writer, thanking us for taking her poem, because I think it's the kind of subject matter. So you got 2 strikes against you, you're, well, maybe 3, you're female, you're older. And those 2 things together, just, I don't see poems about that experience. But I do think that, poetry is about transformation. It's about taking the things that you care about and transforming them with the craft of poetry. And I think we've all got to shrug off that self-censorship and write the things that are meaningful to us.
Yes.
And hopefully, other people will appreciate it as well. If it's well crafted, I think that will come through, and it will win the day over the bias that people may hold toward the material.
I think that's very well said. Well, there's a tradition of women writing about children, a tradition of women writing with a particular kind of freshness in their take on the world. You just have to find the poets that make you feel empowered to write what you want. I'm thinking of Eva Boland, who wrote beautifully about all kinds of women's subject matter. I'll be glad when we no longer think of certain subject matters as being sex designated. There are more male poets writing about domesticity now. which
I think that's so true, Angela. I mean, I noticed in that our last round too, we took a poem by a father writing about his autistic son. And that was an unusual experience as well, especially from the father's point of view, not the mother's.
Are there any other questions? So I've put, so as I said, I want to give Dara Wire all of the credit for these links because she provided them. She also provided this link to Entropy Mag, which has all kinds of resources on it for submissions and, you know, journals and prizes and contests. And Jonathan has reminded everyone to not, Benjamin reminded everyone, sorry, the chat just scrolled up, to remind everybody not to be shy. Are there any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or just unmute your, you know, we can unmute you if you'd like to just jump in. Or anybody want to share their experience?
I don't know if people are aware, but there is a thriving community of women who are mothers and writers on Twitter. Hannah Grieco, Amber Sparks, Tara Whitehead. If you look up some of these names on Twitter, you'll find immediately just a huge clique of writing mothers that might be useful, if that's what you're interested in.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I would jump in and say, just to follow Jonathan, I would say, yeah, Twitter is a really valuable resource for publishing, I think. I have a lot of young poets that ask me all the time, like, how do you find out where to publish? Entropy is great, I think, but Twitter seems to just have like a lot of new journals and people seem to like put their open submissions out there, and it's just really easy for people to retweet and share that. And so that poetry Twitterverse can be like a really rich resource.
Yeah, I have to say I'm kind of Twitter illiterate. I'm not very good at Twitter. Kathy and Angela, are you all like it seems like my grad students are trying to teach me. It seems like I did retweet this panel today. And I was proud of myself for doing that. But I do think so Megan and Jonathan, just and Kate, I'm not sure, Kate, if you have experience with a lot of doing Twitter, but so isn't it that you kind of have to know what the hashtag is, and then once you follow one, then you'll get a bunch of things in that category, right?
I mean, you can search things via hashtag, but if you're using Twitter regularly, I mean, you'll start to be followed and other poets will follow you, and that it just becomes part of the conversation. A lot of people, a lot of small press magazines and online journals will literally put their Twitter handle sometimes as open submissions right now, or the name of their journal, reading right now. So it's really easy for people to search for it. And then it's just a good way when people, I think when you see people who you like as poets being published in places, those are the places maybe that you want to check out and that you want to see about. But I see a lot of new online journals all the time coming up on Twitter. And new journals, of course, are hungry for work. So if you're a young poet and there's a young journal, that might be a really nice fit for you to just get some work out there and support new young online presses as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, I think that's really true, Megan. A lot of my students are publishing in places that I don't even know about. And, you know, there's a whole new community of all of this writing that's growing up together. And I think that's what always happened. It was just in print before, now it's not. Really.
I mean, I definitely remember the age of self-addressed stamped envelopes and mailing things.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, yeah, in one lifetime to go through that whole experience. But yeah, it does seem like there's this growing trend towards the whole, you know, online journals and people just starting new things, and that kind of community via online world that we've all learned to do in the last year. is
right.
real.
I think that's it's really I think over the last year and a half, right, it's grown even more, and that there's much more of an online literary world and conversation going on. And Susan has said, you know, in the chat, that being disabled is really stigmatized and branded negatively. So I have a student who also has found a community on Twitter as someone who is, a student who is disabled. And she's been she's had a really interesting experience during the pandemic, because she said for her life, she's a traditionally aged student, I think is the right way to put it. And she said that life has been a lot easier for her. And Susan is saying yes, yes, yes. So I think that is wonderful. And I, love that is one of the good things that's come out of this, kind of difficult time, if for some of us, it's been difficult. So, so this is a really large topic, and it seems like, we could probably go on for many hours about it. But it's certainly gotten me excited about sending work out, and excited about having this, conversation. So we should create our own Twitter account for this topic and get people to follow us.
Julia, can I just chip in one quick thing?
Yes.
Pardon the background noise of my loud computer fan. I think there's one lesson which every editor would probably agree with me on here, which is speaks partly to your question, Susan. Persistence. And I mean, nothing beats just continuing to send out those envelopes, like Megan was saying, I believe in the journal's work. I found a community of writers here whose work I admire and respect. It took me 9 years to finally place a poem in the Southern Review. When I finally got an acceptance, I just out of curiosity went back and looked at the date of my first submission, and it was something like 2008 to 2017 or something like that. And under no circumstances at any point along the way was I ever entitled to any aspect of it, and I just signed up for the process, recognizing that I loved this journal and it was kind of like a dream. 9 years later, it finally happened. But I really do believe that persistence is one of these things that we have to remember, no matter at what point and stage, our career is, that it's one of the oldest rules. You don't give up. You just don't give up. You keep believing in your own work, and you keep believing in finding that fit. And that, if I'm not stepping on any toes, I think that trumps so many of the considerations that we spend so much time worrying about. It's like, let's just get the work out there. Just keep trying. So, maybe Catherine or Angela, maybe you guys would have something to add on to there. But it was certainly my experience. Just never stop.
Well, when
it's so true that you're not going to get in that magazine unless you send the work to it.
right.
That's definitely not going to happen unless you do that.
And I think often what happens is that the editors end up kind of wanting to get something from you that does work for the magazine. And when they can finally accept something, they're just about as happy as you are. So you're developing a relationship with the editors. That said, it's probably good not to send too often, but send regularly and keep trying. And chances are you may succeed at some point. It could take many years. And once you do start publishing somewhere, it's good to kind of send there regularly and keep your relationship going with the editors and the magazine, because they're part of your kind of family as a writer at that point. And it's really important to give them feedback and act like you are connected. And in that way, then you kind of finally, after a number of years, you have a new poem and you have several ideas immediately of where you might send it.
I think also, if you're so inclined and there's a journal you really want to be in, you might offer to review a book if they publish book reviews. This is something that I've passed along to my grad students, and I always have them write reviews for the critic, because we want reviews, particularly of poetry books, because so many wonderful poetry books never even get one review. And so I like to encourage those reviews, but it's also just a good way to get in that journal you want to be in and have your byline in there, is to contact the editor and see if there's something you can review for them.
Yes.
Well, I think we've gone beyond the hour. I hope to see you all at other New Orleans Poetry Festival events. And Em, I want to thank you so much for your contribution to this. And Kathy's going to get really pumped up on chicory coffee. Is it empty or is it full?
I've used it all. It's now empty. I used the last of it today.
Oh.
I know, sad.
Well, thank you everybody for coming, and this was inspiring, and I hope everybody has a great Friday evening, and next time we'll be in New Orleans.
Submit to New World Writing and the Hollins Critic. Send us points.
Yes, and look at all those links that that Dara provided. Thanks again, everybody, and see you in New Orleans next year.
Great.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. The next session is polyvocal strategies on and off the page, and that's at 5:30. If anybody's interested in that, and of course we have events going all month long.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Benjamin.
Thank you. Thank you, Benjamin.
I don't want to say goodbye.
Keep in touch, and by all means, please join us for more events. We've got a lot cooked up for the rest of the month.
Angela and I were both in the prose poem event. I was on the live Facebook feed last night. That was cool.
Nice. Yeah. Now I'll give you guys a little inside baseball. I am currently concocting a secret plan, and not even Jonathan knows